In 1974, a health advocate in London decided to consume 70 million units of vitamin A in around 10 gallons of carrot juice over a period of 10 days. His skin turned yellow and he died.
Today I am going to show you the dumbest ways people have died. Hopefully that doesn't get me demonetized. Let's do this.
Dumbest ways to die. Number 10. Using your phone while in the bathtub.
What?
Yes, people actually use electrical appliances while in the bath. In old movies, you'd often see a scene in which someone throws a radio into the bathtub to murder someone else, with such a typical scene being a warning to people to keep electrical appliances far away from the tub. Fast forward to the digital age and people have died while using Twitter in the bath. That happened in Romania a few years ago. The media called it Twittercide. Another person died quite recently in the US while using a cell phone in the bathtub while it was charging. It's too recent to go into details, but what we will tell you right now is this: do not use your phone while you are in the bathtub. Okay, if it's not plugged in, it won't cause you any harm if you drop it into the water, but it's not a good habit to get into. Number 9. Eating laundry detergent.
What?
You've all heard of the Tide Pod Challenge, wherein teens eat one of the small pods and video themselves doing it. Now this shouldn't lead to death, but you might be surprised. In 2018, just over a matter of weeks, the American Association of Poison Control Centers reported that 86 people called poison control after eating a Tide Pod. We cannot stress enough how dangerous this is to the health of individuals, said one report in an interview with Vice. It can lead to seizure, pulmonary edema, respiratory arrest, coma, and even death. The UK Telegraph also reported in 2018 that 8 deaths occurred in the US from 2012 to 2017 as a result of eating detergent pods. These deaths were mainly young kids and older people suffering from mental problems, but it shows you that this can seriously be a dumb way to die.
Yeah, that's a dumb way to die.
Perhaps the question we should be asking is, why do they make them look so damn delicious? Number 8,
Tide Pods
death by Lego.
don't look delicious.
So you know that standing on a piece of Lego can be excruciatingly painful. Science tells us it's up there with some of the world's worst pains. But you could do worse. You could choke on a piece of Lego. And yes, there are cases. Now, this usually happens to young kids, so we can't really blame them as they are too young to understand the danger. But then you've got deaths by pen caps, and these people who should know better have choked after thinking it was a good idea to have a nibble on it. If you do find yourself choking on something you shouldn't have put in your mouth, first try coughing hard, or you can push your thumb in the space below your ribs, or even try leaning over a chair, table, or railing, performing a kind of Heimlich maneuver on yourself. Number 7. Holding in poop. Who hasn't just held on for that little bit longer so they didn't have to stop doing something and go to the bathroom? All of us. And sometimes you might not have a choice, such as when you are on a bus or sitting in a park on a summer's day with the girl or boy of your dreams. But holding it in can be deadly, as a 16-year-old girl found out in 2013 in the UK. We don't want to worry you too much though, as you'd have to hold it in for a very long time. One doctor, when interviewed, said, "It's not uncommon to see young people in their teens or 20s come in and say they haven't gone to the bathroom in 2 weeks." Okay, so death is unlikely, but just go to the toilet or get some help if you can't poop.
2 weeks?
Number 6. Pets that can kill you. Not too long ago, a British man was found dead in his room, and the culprit was his 8-foot-long python pet that he dearly loved. Apparently, they got along very well, but animals can always be unpredictable, so if one is having a bad day and it's powerful enough to kill you, well, maybe you should just get a hamster. We can find instances of pet lizards killing their owners, or death by pet tiger, pet bear, pet spider, and pet rat. Even dogs that have a predilection for violence and are big and strong enough have mauled their owners to death. A Shih Tzu might not ward off burglars or impress your tough buddies, but at least it won't eat you for dinner after a bad day. Number 5. The amateur parkour. People who practice the discipline of parkour usually have just that, discipline. While it's always dangerous to some extent, the professionals are well trained. But it seems some people try it anyway, even without much training, or worse, when drunk. Yes, there are quite a few deaths of amateur parkour cases out there. It's mostly young folks trying to get hits on social media or YouTube, when the only meaningful hit they get is one to the head. We are not all created to be famous, so don't try and copy something highly skilled parkour professionals do. In short, don't be a jackass. Number 4. Squashed by a vending machine. Okay, so we've all been bugged at some point when what we paid for at the vending machine didn't come out.
I hate that.
What to do?
I hate that.
Tip the thing, of course.
Even worse, when you use one of them claw machines like in Toy Story at an arcade, and you get the toy like it's right in the claw, and it come up and it go around the toy like it's not even strong enough to pull it. Bro, I hate that. I saw a guy fight one of those vending machines and lose. Broke his whole hand.
Perhaps some of you burgeoning criminals have in the past thought it was a good idea to just tip it to see if you can get a freebie. Well, a study cited by The Guardian shows that this tipping of the vending machine has been for some people, mainly males aged 15 to 25, the last thing they ever did. This dance of death has led to the fatalities of more people than you would believe. Number 3. Death by baguette or sausage. You might remember from one of our other shows that hot dogs kill quite a lot of people, urging one official to say they should come with a warning on them. In 2014, 77 people choked to death on hot dogs. But baguettes? Surely you couldn't choke on something that big. Well, we'll leave you with this opening sentence of an article that appeared in the British media a few years ago. An inquest heard how a Middlesbrough man choked and died after stuffing bread and pâté into his mouth. Number 2. Laughing yourself to death. Yes, this actually happens, and there are notable cases throughout history. One of the more recent cases involved a man from the UK who laughed himself to death in 1975 after watching Kung Fu Capers, an episode of the TV series called The Goodies.
Should I watch that episode? Should I?
Apparently, it was so funny that he laughed for 25 minutes, after which he fell onto the sofa and died of heart failure. A similar thing happened to a Danish man in 1989, and the cause of his laughter was the movie A Fish Called Wanda.
What?
So, just be careful when you choose your comedies. Number 1. Pretending to be a superhero. In 2017, a woman died after a 34-foot fall at the World Trade Center Oculus. According to news reports, she had been pretending to be a superhero. Unfortunately, she wasn't the first and probably won't be the last. In 2014, a kid died in Indonesia after he thought he had the powers of Spider-Man. Another boy in China died after he thought he had the powers of Superman. He was only 4, but should have known better. According to China Daily in 2011, the boy jumped from the 4th floor with his arms outstretched like Superman and was followed a few minutes later by his 4-year-old brother. The older brother survived the fall. Is this catching on? The USA has its real-life superhero in Phoenix Jones. In 2011, he had his nose broken and a gun put in his face while trying to protect some innocent bystanders. In 2015, the British press reported that some Scousers, another name for people from Liverpool, were posting videos on YouTube in which they were doing dangerous things while pretending to be Superman. A word to the wise, superheroes aren't real, and pretending to be them might get you killed.
13. The irony of dying while keeping fit. We'll give you just one famous example of a victim of irony, and that is the case of the former American jogging guru Jim Fixx. He wrote The Complete Book of Running in 1977, and it became a bestseller. In fact, he's said to be one of the main people that started what was called America's fitness revolution. Fixx had once been overweight and also a heavy smoker, but then he started his exercise regime, sold his books, and told the American people that running was the secret to having a long life and good health. He died of a heart attack while running when he was just 52 years old. Okay, so that's perhaps not so strange, and will get stranger, but we just wanted to give you an example of death by irony.
I mean, it could be
12.
worse.
Death by clothing.
Death by clothing.
You've all heard news media write stories about what it calls draconian laws or rules. This just usually means out-of-date laws or laws that seem way too strict or even brutal. We get this adjective from a Greek lawmaker called Draco. In Athens in the 7th century BC, this man created laws that were said to be unfair, or at least unfair if you were not part of the wealthy group of people. His harsh legal code could mean cruel punishments for even petty crimes. Nonetheless, it said he was popular at the time with the crowds. But in those days, the public did seem to enjoy watching blood being spilled. It said during one appearance in the Aeginetan Theater, the crowd wanted to show their adoration, so they threw their hats, cloaks, and shirts at him. But they went overboard, and it said Draco suffocated under the avalanche of clothing from his admirers. We should say that this is an old story passed down, so one might question how it actually happened. Maybe they meant to kill him, but we'll never know what happened that fateful day. 11. Death by proving that something is safe. You may have heard about this one, as it's popped up in various TV series from time to time. The story is of a Canadian lawyer called Gary Hoy. On July 9th, 1993, he was taking people on a tour of the Toronto Dominion Centre, a building of many floors with a lot of glass windows. He wanted to demonstrate to the people just how strong the windows were, as rightly some folks were concerned about such a high glass-fronted building. To do this, he did something he'd done before and threw himself at a glass window to show that the glass was very strong. He was right that the glass didn't smash, but on this occasion, the window popped out of its frame and Hoy fell a long way to his death. An engineer later told the Canadian media, "I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass and withstand it." That might have been some shock for the bystanders. 10. Same but different. This is another story of a lawyer trying to prove a point to people and in doing so, killed himself. The man was an American lawyer called Clement Vallandigham, and in 1871 he was representing a client that was accused of murder. The lawyer was trying to prove that the victim wasn't murdered but had accidentally killed himself. He tried to show how this might have happened and accidentally shot himself. He died, but his client got off the murder charge. 9. Death by beard. A tourism website in Austria tells us that people can visit the epitaph of a man called Hans Steininger. He was a mayor of Braunau in the 16th century and was well known for having a really long beard. We're told it was so long that if not tied, it would trail on the floor. One day, the poor guy was walking down the street and he tripped on his own beard, broke his neck, and died. To this day, his beard is kept in the local museum. 8. Death by banana. Slipping on a banana skin is perhaps the
Was this Mario Kart?
best known gag joke, and of course it doesn't happen very often. But searching online, we can find one death certificate from 1927 that did indeed blame a banana skin for the death of a man. The 74-year-old slipped and died in Tennessee. 7. Death by piano. If people do actually die from slipping on banana skins, do they also die by a piano falling on their heads? Well, someone actually investigated this, and that writer found at least one incident when a piano being pulled up a building had come crashing down on a person below. The website Straight Dope writes, in 1931 a piano was being hoisted up to a second-story window when a cornice broke free from the building, falling and killing a mover below.
That's a Looney Tunes ass way to die, bruh. Looney Tunes ass way to die.
But perhaps the most famous piano death out there was that of a strip club bouncer called Jimmy Ferrozzo. In 1983, at a club in San Francisco, he and his girlfriend had been making love on a piano that was connected to a hoist so it could be lowered down for performances and raised when it wasn't being used. This time, the piano was down on the floor, but during the act of passion, one of the two accidentally hit the switch and the piano was pulled up. Jimmy was consequently crushed against the ceiling, but we are told his lover survived the incident. 6. Killed by a bird. We can actually find a few instances of people being killed by birds.
Stabbed to death by a bird. Birds have knives now? Birds are carrying weapons? What type of shit?
But this one has to be the strangest. It also involves a fair bit of karma. In 2011, a 35-year-old California resident called Jose Luis Ochoa was stabbed to death by a bird. The BBC writes that the man had been at an illegal cockfight and had taken with him a cock that had sharp spurs on its legs, which were more like little knives. The bird apparently turned on its owner and he suffered what the coroner called a sharp force injury. A police spokesperson told the media, "I have never seen this type of an incident." No kidding. 5. Killing your son. The snake. In 2013, a Japanese man called Takuya Nagaya had apparently been acting a bit weird at his parents' apartment in Okazaki City. He'd been slithering around like a snake. Of course, his father came to the rational conclusion that his son had been possessed by some kind of snake demon. He then did the next rational thing and took matters into his own hands. Well, we should say head and teeth. Reports tell us his son died from injuries sustained while the father was trying to get the snake out of him by biting and headbutting him. You can only imagine what the scene must have looked like. 4. A cow through the roof. The BBC reported in 2013 that a Brazilian man was killed in his bed when a cow came crashing down through his roof. Somehow, the rather large animal got into his asbestos roof and fell right through it. Apparently, this wasn't the first time a cow had fallen through a roof in this rural area. The 45-year-old died from internal bleeding. 3. Death by slug. Many of us might have done some silly things just because we were dared to do it, or we wanted to win some money or just show off. This goes wrong all the time, and you can find endless video clips of Darwin Award types of stunts online. In November 2018, the world's media reported the death of an Australian man called Sam Ballard, who had died aged 28. 8 years prior to his death, the skilled rugby player had been at a party with friends in Sydney. No doubt quite a bit of alcohol had been consumed, and during the party, a slug turned up on the scene. Ballard's friends, writes The Independent, dared him to eat the slug. That he did, but as a result, he became very sick. He was taken to a hospital, and it was found later that he had been infected by a parasite known as rat lungworm. This ended up paralyzing the young man and was the reason he died some years later. 2. Death by cockroach. You shouldn't eat slugs, and you also probably shouldn't eat cockroaches.
That's
the
real.
BBC tells us that in 2012, a man from Florida by the name of Edward Archbold had entered himself into a live cockroach eating competition. He had done well, devouring dozens of the creatures, but it also killed him. The coroner ruled that his death was caused by asphyxia due to choking and aspiration of gastric contents. In short, he had choked on cockroach body parts. 1. The body of Christ. We know that some Christians will take into their mouths something that symbolizes the body of Christ, but one Canadian man took this a step further in 1987. According to the Toronto Globe and Mail, a man called Franco Brune had been taken in by police and left in the cells. It turns out that in the cell, the man had made use of a small Gideon's Bible by swallowing it. He choked to death on it. News reports tell us that for this mentally unwell man, the swallowing of the Bible to him was some form of symbolism or allegory, as though he was trying to purge himself of the devil by consuming religion.
Motherfucker.
Number 8. Don't get friendly with some wild animals. Some people in this world of ours have mistakenly thought that wild animals are not actually that wild, and so they've gotten up close to what we might call natural-born killers in the animal kingdom. Arguably, the most famous case was that of a guy named Timothy Treadwell. If you haven't seen the movie about his exploits called Grizzly Man, we suggest you do at some point. Treadwell spent many of his summers in Alaska living among grizzly bears, animals that can rip a person's face off with one swipe. These animals are certainly fluffy and cute, but they are not the kinds of things we suggest you treat like a teddy bear. Treadwell was actually cautious with the bears, but he also got up close to them. Too close. After 13 summers with the bears, parts of his clothing were found inside the stomach of a 28-year-old grizzly. His girlfriend was also eaten. So, yes, you have to be careful when you're around wild animals. It should be obvious, but it obviously isn't obvious to some people. There are a few recent cases of people being killed by wild animals. We don't mean to make fun of these people since their families are still grieving for them. But if we don't say anything, then we won't get the message across that you should not get up close to these certain beasts. In 2018, a man in India decided he wanted a selfie with a bear. It didn't end well, since the apex predator mauled him to death. Maybe you think that's unusual, but quite a few people have taken mortal selfies with wild animals. In fact, the BBC reported in 2018 that there had been a spate of deaths in India because people thought they could take selfies with elephants. Our advice is don't do it. It's not worth the likes on social media. In 2016 in China, a man thought it'd be a good idea to get up close to a walrus at a wildlife park and take a selfie. The walrus wasn't playing around though and pulled the man into the water and killed him. A zookeeper also died while trying to help the man. In 2015, officials at Yellowstone National Park had to issue a stark warning to all visitors. That was, please stop trying to take selfies with bison. Yep, there had been lots of cases of people doing this, and while no one died, some people suffered very serious injuries after being tossed around like a doll. It's like this, some folks hit flies away with their hands. They don't like flies. Well, some animals don't much like humans being around them. Some of them even want to eat you. Unfortunately, it gets worse than this, as you'll now see. Number 7. The gun just went off. If you search online for people who accidentally shot and killed themselves, you'll find that it happens quite often. Guns are not toys, and that's why they have safety mechanisms. There are too many cases of this happening to mention, and a lot of them happened in recent months and years in the USA. We found another case of a partygoer dying when messing with a gun. This happened in India in 2018. 3 guys were drinking when one man started showing off his pistol. The gun accidentally went off and the man died. It was reported in some Indian media that the guy was actually playing the game Russian roulette. He lost. If you don't know what that game is, it's putting one bullet in a chamber of a revolver, then spinning the chamber, and then you put the gun to your head and pull the trigger, hoping that the bullet isn't the one in the chamber. You'd think someone would have to be crazy to play that game. But if you look online, you'll find plenty of people who have died this way. Some cases are quite recent and happened in the USA. In Thailand in 2017, a man played this game with his wife. That was a very bad move because he ended up killing her. Be careful what you shoot at, too. In 1982, some guys in Arizona thought it'd be fun to shoot at a massive saguaro cacti. One of the men shot at a 26-foot-tall cactus, and a bit broke off. It landed on him and crushed him to death. The moral of the story is never, ever play with guns. Don't become a statistic. Don't end up being talked about on the infographic show. The next dumb way to die is arguably even a bigger killer around the world. Number 6. Death by mushroom. Mushrooms grow everywhere, and some of the edible ones sometimes look a bit like the poisonous ones. You wouldn't believe how many people just pick up some wild mushrooms, go home, eat them, and die. There are so many cases, and it seems most mushroom deaths happen in Asia, but not all. In 2019, one French woman died and 3 others were hospitalized after they had picked up some wild mushrooms they believed to be porcini mushrooms. They weren't. They were a mushroom known as a death cap, which doesn't sound like something you should eat.
Sounds like something out of a Super Mario video game on Super Nintendo.
The lesson here is you should never pick your own mushrooms unless you are a mushroom expert. There are lots of deadly mushrooms in this world of ours. These things have actually killed families and have injured or killed many people living in small communities. In 2014, 14 people in North Carolina became severely ill after eating mushrooms they had foraged. No one died, but they almost did. 3 of the people needed liver transplants. We found other cases in the 90s where people died in California after picking mushrooms they thought they could eat. The mushrooms, again, were the death caps. Death caps look like something you could eat, but they also look a bit like magic mushrooms, the hallucinogenic mushroom. Not too long ago, 4 men in the US became seriously ill after eating death caps. They thought they were going to get high and talk about the meaning of existence. Instead, they suffered severe liver damage. Okay, now to the realm of violent deaths again. This is not how you want to go. Number 5, be careful where you swim. It's not really a dumb way to die if you just swim and something decides to eat you. But it's quite dumb if you've seen all the don't swim signs that tell you the water is full of massive crocodiles.
Oh.
It's happened in Australia in recent years, with one case involving a young man ignoring the signs and taking a dip. That swim ended up with the man being partly eaten by a croc. It's happened in the ocean, where massive saltwater crocodiles have taken people's lives, but it's also happened in rivers. There's a stretch of water in Australia called East Alligator River. Would you want to enter that river?
No.
Well, the authorities in recent years have been saying people know very well that they should not go in the water, but they do it as a kind of dare. Some parts of this river you can wade across, and there's a notorious crocodile hotspot called Cahill's Crossing. One guy tried to cross in 2017 and he didn't get very far. A croc took him and killed him. When he was taken, he was only standing in ankle-deep water. You should always do what those signs tell you. We're not even going to mention how many drownings there are when people swim in the ocean when signs say don't because of the conditions. Just do what you're told, that's our advice. The next one probably kills more people than anything on this list. Number 4, treating cuts. We'll make this one short. Our advice is if you cut yourself and you have an open wound, then get it treated. Don't just ignore it because the cut might become infected. You know what? Scores of people don't treat their wounds and later they die from infection. In the 17th century, there was a famous case and involved a composer named Jean-Baptiste Lully. This guy loved dancing, and one particular dance he enjoyed involved banging a staff on the floor. One day he missed the floor and he hit his foot. This caused a pretty serious wound and it led to an infection. Lully was told at the time that this infection could kill him and his leg would have to be amputated. The man said, "No, if I lose that leg, I won't be able to dance anymore." He died soon after. Now for something we might call completely disgusting. Number 3, overeating. Yup, some people just eat too much in one sitting and die. There's an old Monty Python movie that features a man in a restaurant that eats until he explodes. And while that won't happen, people can die from consuming massive meals. It happened in the 18th century to Adolf Fredrik, the King of Sweden, aka the man who ate himself to death. In one meal, he ate lots of his beloved lobster, dishes of caviar, some sauerkraut, some smoked herring, and he washed that all down with lots of champagne. After that, he had a whopping 14 servings of semla served with a bowl of hot milk. Semla is like cream bun. The meal was in fact not far from what the guy ordered in the Monty Python movie. The king didn't explode, but he couldn't digest that much food and he died. You could die of a reputed stomach, something you might have seen in the movie called Seven. The Lancet reported a case in the 1980s of a slim London-based model dying because she ate too much. That publication said she had consumed a half pound of steak, 1 pound of liver, 2 pounds of kidney, 2 eggs, 1 cauliflower, 10 peaches, 4 pears, 4 bananas, 2 apples, 2 glasses of milk, 2 slices of bread, and 2 pounds each of grapes, plums, and carrots.
Damn,
it was just too much and her stomach ruptured, which means to burst. Death by eating too much has happened at eating competitions too. A man in California recently died while taking part in a taco eating contest. The guy who watched the contest and saw this man eat said it was like he'd never eaten before. He was just shoving the tacos down his mouth without chewing. The guy collapsed during the contest. It's thought he choked to death. There are scores of stories of people dying after eating too much. Look online and you'll find them. One particular guy might have seen the movie Cool Hand Luke, because in that movie, Luke eats 40 boiled eggs for a bet. This happened in India, and it involved 2 men. One guy bet his friend that he couldn't eat 50 raw eggs in one sitting. The man got to 41 and died. Doctors said his death was simply caused by overeating. The next on this list is the most surprising and disturbing. Too much of a good thing can kill you, and that good thing could be a certain vitamin. Yes, consuming too many vitamins can be fatal. There's a famous case of a bunch of explorers that had a terrible time on an Australasian Antarctic expedition. 2 men died after falling into a crevasse, and 2 other guys got lost. They survived by eating the dogs they had with them. The men got back to the base camp, but they both fell very ill, and one of them died. First, he became terribly sick. His hair fell out, his skin peeled off. He became delirious, and then he died. Doctors now say those symptoms were in line with vitamin A overdose. The vitamins apparently came from the dog's livers. Those guys didn't have many options, but some people choose to get too many vitamins down them. In 1974, a health advocate in London decided to consume 70 million units of vitamin A in around 10 gallons of carrot juice over a period of 10 days. His skin turned yellow and he died. When you consume too many vitamins, you can suffer from something called hypervitaminosis. This can be deadly, and you can find instances of when it happened. You might get kidney damage and survive, but you might also give up the ghost. It happened to a 10-year-old boy in India in 2016. He was prescribed vitamin D supplements, but it was just too much and he overdosed. We found more recent cases in the US when people died after consuming too much vitamin D. In some cases, it's the doctors who are dumb, not the consumers. But we don't want to scare you from getting your essential vitamins, just don't go crazy. And for this last one, you're gonna see that many young folk die every year from doing one stupid thing. Number 1, deadly deodorant. Okay, so we all want to smell good, but you should know that people have died from using too much deodorant. These are sad stories since the victims probably had an issue with how they smelled or what some people had said to them about their body odor, but they really shouldn't have gone crazy with the spray. In the 90s, a UK teenager died after spraying himself with deodorant all the time. It wasn't the fact that the stuff killed him by getting in his skin, but the fact that he sprayed it too often in a confined space. He died because over time he just inhaled too much spray. The autopsy showed 0.37 milligrams of butane per liter was in his blood. A level of 0.1 milligram per liter can kill you. It happened another time not that long ago in the UK. A young man was obsessed with his smell and he used deodorant all the time. In fact, an investigation found he had 45 cans of the stuff in his room. He inhaled too much and died. His mother later said he would not take showers but would stand there with deodorant and spray half of a can on him. You can actually find lots of deodorant deaths that happened in the UK and the US over the last few years. It's happened to both boys and girls. We won't mention them all because there are way too many. What we will say is that you should know this can happen. We don't mean to make fun of those people, we want you to know the dangers. That's why those sprays usually come with the warning, use in well-ventilated places. Let's be honest.
What's messed up is I actually know people who won't bathe, but also won't use the deodorant either. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, and or subscribe. Thanks for sending me these clips. Twisms.